And one of the things that came back from that research is that our product, our technology was actually working better for fit people, which, snoring is usually old, out of shape guys like me, right?
My wife would disagree.
Well, we're stereotyping here.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Sports Dentistry podcast. So you've took yourself off to Spain and Barcelona, more.
Yes, so my wife's brother lives in a place called Sant Cugat, so it's about 30 minutes away from Barcelona, and he's lived here for about 30 years. So we decided to come out here and visit him for a few days. And luckily, they've also got a family home or a family holiday home just south of Barcelona in a place called Calafate, which is near Tarragona. Now, I'm trying to get my Spanish pronunciation correct because where we're at just now, in this little lovely holiday home village area, Calafate, there's no English. So it's Spanish and French. And my Spanish and my French is extremely poor, but my wife and my daughter, my 6-year-old, can actually communicate to a degree in Spanish. So they're keeping me afloat at the minute. I need to make sure that when I get back, I take Spanish lessons because that's poor from me.
But you do know the best phrase in Spanish.
Absolutely.
Por favor. I think.
Yeah, I do know that, and that's been used many a time. So I don't think that's been much of an issue. But I think just, being able to communicate, and because we're so ignorant in the UK, right? Because we just expect everybody else to be able to speak English, and going to the restaurants and even to the supermarkets when things are written in Spanish, it's like, what do you do? But actually, we just figured out on Google Translate, if you take a photo of whatever it is, it literally translates it into English. So we were trying to play this game, this board game, and it was all in Spanish. And then luckily my wife then from Google Translate, she put it in and we actually managed to play the game with translating through that. It was amazing. I suppose technology now is so advanced that anything you need, you just look up it on your phone, Google or what other search engines there are, and you'll get the answer like that. It's crazy, really.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly everything's developing, but it's good as well because it's going to help people come together. We've spoke about this in the past about maybe having a international sports dentistry event. And one of the challenges will be the multilingual aspect of it, with a lot of Spanish native speakers, a lot of Portuguese native speakers, and us lazy English speakers that don't speak any other language. So I was trying to bring everybody together that way, and the likes of AI, that might make that a better experience and more possible then. So that's really, really interesting how everything develops so quickly. Just when I was thinking about Barcelona, it brings me back to 1992 Olympic Games. And that song, would you remember that? No? Barcelona, it's a beautiful horizon.
Not really. I was only been 7 years old then. But the funny thing is, we actually went, not this time, but last time to Barcelona. We went up to where the Olympics were and where the swimming pool was and all that sort of stuff. And it's incredible setup and how it was. And that was literally right in the city centre, and well, parts of it was definitely. And I don't have any recollection really of Barcelona Olympic Games, so you might have to fill me in there.
Yeah, well, it was just because back then there was so little sport on TV compared to now, where there's so much choice. And the Olympics was one of the big events that would get shown on TV. I think also because Ireland got 4 goals. So we got a male boxer, got a gold, Michael Cruz. I think he's still the only male gold boxer to win at the Olympic Games. Obviously, we've got Katie Taylor that won in 2012, and Kerry Harrington has done the double there. She did Tokyo and Paris with the gold in the boxing, but as a male boxer, he's still the only Irish one to get a gold. And we also had a Belfast kid who was a kid then, Wayne McCulloch. He got silver. So it was always on. And then we also had Michelle Smith, who got 3 goals in the swimming pool, but then subsequently she got them taken off for failing a drug test. So it was all big news at the time. So it
Oh,
was
no way.
right, yeah. So it was very much in the papers and very much in Irish TV and stuff. So that's why it all sticks in my head. The 1992 Olympic Games sticks in my head more than the 1996 one. I think it was in Athens. Like I don't really have much memories from 1996, which you think was 4
Yeah.
years old. I should have, but it was maybe just because there was so much going on from an Irish perspective in 1992. It still sticks in my head, that Barcelona Olympic Games.
Yeah, I think you'll gravitate towards certain tournaments, especially if there's people from your own country who are performing and it's on TV and it's in the news and you're kind of listening to it. You do remember certain aspects of the World Cups or Olympic Games, because I remember when Scotland played Brazil in the World Cup in America, soccer World Cup, and Scotland scored first, and watching it in my grand's house on this tiny little TV and just thinking, wow, we must be decent at football. We scored first against Brazil. And then it just went all tits up after that.
First goal wins. Should have been first goal wins. Next goal wins.
Winner stays on. Winner stays on. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you're right though. You do gravitate, and the memories do come from seeing athletes who are from your home nation. You can relate to that as well, and it's sport. Boxing is obviously a big thing for you too, so that probably sticks in your mind more with regards to that.
Yeah, so it's one of the sports we're really successful in. We did around about 2000. Sydney sticks out because we had Sonia O'Sullivan, who was a really strong middle distance runner, and she medalled there as well. So we have good memories from that one as well. So we've got a guest on. We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago with Aniel McCarr. We talked about performance mouthguards, and we spoke then about how it was difficult. It's a difficult concept to mass produce this, because you need a dentist that is able to assess the occlusion and find the best occlusion for the athlete and put that into the mouthguard. So it's really interesting. This conversation we're going to have this week, where we're going to be speaking to Bob Molhoek from AIRWAAV, and AIRWAAV is a boil and bite performance mouthguard option.
Yeah, after the conversation with Neil, I did a little bit of digging, and I just thought there must be something out there that we in the UK haven't really heard of. There's not much going on. And actually, when I stumbled across AIRWAAV, kind of clicked something in my head, because I remember researching a little bit last year, but it just completely went out my system, and having a look at it and to see what athletes that they've managed to get on board with their products, and what their unique selling points are. So touched base with them. I said, look, quite interested to get you in the podcast, and they were mad keen to come on, or somebody, a representative from them, being Bob in this case, to come on and just talk us through their journey, kind of how they began. There's the research behind it, what evidence is there to suggest that their mouthpieces are performance enhancing, what sort of mouthpieces do they have, how are the athletes wearing it. And then when I had a discussion with you, and we said, look, we should get AIRWAAV on and we should have a discussion, because we want this to be an open podcast, and we want people to come on board and tell us about their journeys, and the listeners can make their own decisions on it and they can do their own research on it. But we need to give people like AIRWAAV and these manufacturers a platform for them to be able to tell us their side of the story, because I think that's really important, that we're very transparent and then we're not seen to take sides, but we think we need to give everybody a voice, and then they can make their own decisions.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, as we've spoke about it before, that everybody's different, so it's not a one size fit all solution, especially when it comes to dentistry and healthcare. So being able to know exactly what all the options are and being able to use the best option for that athlete at that time is kind of how we can best serve the athletes, instead of just being narrow focused on one way of doing things. I think it's important that we have a full knowledge of all the available options and all the areas of sports dentistry, so we can support the athlete as best we can. And every athlete's different. Like, we're going to speak a lot probably about sports that we mightn't have spoke a lot before, just looking at the type of athletes that are using their AIRWAAV products, or they're coming from a background of CrossFit and World's Strongest Man. And these are sports that we haven't really touched on with the other guests before as well. So that's going to be quite interesting as well. So it may even be sports specific where we choose a different option for the athlete depending on what sport they're competing in. So it's important that we know all the options out there so we can really tailor make the solution to that athlete.
Yeah, and expands our knowledge base in terms of what we're able to provide. We've not touched on CrossFit. We've not touched really on High Rocks. We've not really touched on World's Strongest Man or Women, these sort of events, because we've been so focused on contact sport. But actually, the amount of people who do work out and who do lift weights and do endurance running or cycling, or they do HIIT training, so high intensity interval training, and what HIIT does in terms of not just clenching and grinding and what's happening with the airway itself, but also with nutrition and how that affects everything. So there's a lot of different things that we've touched on before, which kind of comes together with these sort of athletes as well. So again, hopefully it'll open our minds a bit more once we've had this discussion with Bob, and to give our listeners a little bit more info in terms of what we could do with regards to helping these athletes train and get better and improve.
Yeah. So it's going to be good. So let's go. Hey everyone, save the date. The UK Sports Dentistry Association's second conference is happening on Friday the 12th of September at the Voco Hotel in Manchester. And guess what? It's not just about teeth. We're combining cutting-edge sports dentistry talks with the thrill of live sport. Right after the conference, we're heading to Emirates Old Trafford for the England versus South Africa T20 International. Expect a day packed with expert speakers, athlete Q&A sessions, and plenty of time for networking with dentists, sports pros, and athletes alike. Whether you're in dentistry or passionate about sport, this is a day you won't want to miss. Tickets are live now at sportsdentistryuk.com. Grab yours and join us for an unforgettable day. I'm delighted to welcome on to the Sports Dentistry podcast this week, Bob Molhoek. Definitely not pronouncing that right, but like that's easy, is it? So, but you do pronounce it Molhoek, yeah?
Yes, that I picked that up in high school and it kind of stuck. So
Yeah, it brings back memories of me. I used to have a mohawk. Now it was only so I was like second year in dental school, and I was playing for the Irish football team. And I said, if we get to the playoffs, I'm going to get a mohawk. So got to the playoffs. There was 3 rounds of playoffs. So the first playoff, I got a mohawk, and we won. So it goes, I need to go a little bit further. So I bleached the mohawk part for the second match. And we won the second match. And then I thought I'd go a wee bit further for the third match. Our team colours were red and green. So I coloured the mohawk red and green for the third match. And we were lucky enough we won the third match. But I remember going back into dental school on the Monday and getting called aside and I was told, now, when you become a dentist, you cannot have a haircut like that.
I was going to ask what your professors thought when you got back into class.
Yeah, they weren't very impressed.
Yeah, you're going to have to get those photos. They'll be in circulation. You need to get them out there.
So, Bob, it's great to have you on. So just give us a little bit of a background to yourself and how you got into sports dentistry.
Yeah, great. I was a competitive athlete growing up, playing 3 sports in high school and ice hockey in college. And so loved sports, wore mouth guards my whole life. And in about 2005, I met the founder of Shock Doctor Mouth Guards, which is probably the best-selling mouth guard in the world. And he had developed a new product that I thought was really cool. And he brought me to a dentist's office, Dr. Mike Nanny, who was Lou Nanny's son, who anybody in the States will know Lou Nanny, a very famous hockey icon. And I was made physically stronger in this dental office. And shortly thereafter decided, like, this is unbelievable. It was like an out-of-body experience. I'd never experienced anything like it. And shortly thereafter, quit my job and helped launch dental product, mouth guard, and a performance mouthpiece, and had a ton of fun and met a lot of athletes. And that product didn't end up with the commercial success. But then I boomeranged back into the business 6 years ago with AIRWAAV.
Right, so just take me back. So Shock Doctor probably is, when it comes to especially boiling about mouth guards, is the leading sort of person probably internationally with it. So can you go a wee bit more into detail around that with Shock Doctor and stuff at the time when you came in? Was it mainly they're looking at the boil and bite stuff, and how did that translate then to going into a clinic and doing that type of stuff?
Yeah, obviously Shock Doctor had, they were really the market leader to get rolling. They were the first, I think, really compelling multi-shot injection molded mouth guard, had the most technology, and they were first, right? They were the first company, I would say, to create a brand, a recognizable household brand. The bigger companies like Nike and Under Armour and Adidas typically had licensing relationships. And, they would see a mouth guard as an afterthought and an accessory. A lot of those bigger companies weren't as interested in equipment. And so, we had developed a doctor named Dr. Paul Belvedere, who was the team dentist for the Minnesota North Stars hockey team in the US, had developed and patented what he referred to as a wedge technology plate that would be injection molded or fabricated into a custom fitted athletic mouth guard that was basically a tool. It would, when you would clench down and bite on it, it would create the reverse of the curve of Spee. And so your jaw would naturally go forward, opening the airway. And, Dr. Nanny had worked with Dr. Paul Belvedere, and then John Kittleson who was the founder of Shock Doctor, had created this new product to, try to bring performance enhancing technology into an athletic mouth guard. And so we actually started with the product, and it was 100% custom fabricated by dentists. So, we had worked with Patterson Dental with that product to help distribute it to dentists. We had partnered with Under Armour to, as a licensing relationship to, bring their brand into dental office. And then a big part of what we really developed was a way to say, okay, this is great for, hockey players and football players or soccer players, but, there's a performance enhancing component to this that would, is relevant to lots of other athletes that don't wear athletic mouth guards. And so we had designed a product to do that as well. And again, partnered with Under Armour to bring that out. It didn't have the commercial success. I left that company actually in 2012, and the company was called Bite Tech. It subsequently went out of business, I think 5 or 6 years after that.
So was Shock Doctor linked in with that as well?
No, Shock.
No,
It was a
no,
completely different company. Yeah, the founder of Shock Doctor had left that company,
Okay.
and started the company called Bite Tech, which is where I
Okay.
had worked previously.
Okay. And they were looking at the performance aspect was changing the lower jaw position with a wedge in the mouth guard.
Correct.
That was,
Yep. And
yeah.
yep, either a wedge and a mouth guard that was built into a protective mouth guard that would fit on the upper teeth, and then also a performance mouthpiece that would fit on the lower for non-contact sports or for training off-field or off-ice training for
And,
traditional.
and if I remember right, because I was part of the network of UK providers for the Under Armour mouth guard at the time, there was options for boil and bite options as well as custom fit options. And did you notice from your time there, did you notice a difference between the custom fitted or boil and bite, either from success, from sales or compliance or performance? Was there any sort of, I'm just quite interested because by changing the lower jaw position, you'd almost think to keep it sort of consistent, you need to have a good retention in the mouth guard. And we know there's a little bit of a difference between custom fitted and boil and bite. I'm just wondering, did you see that from your end? Was there any sort of difference from your end?
I think the trick with any mouth guard is if it doesn't fit well and it's not comfortable, an athlete's not going to wear it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think, I've met a lot of dentists who would love to put a 6 millimeter thick mouth guard in athletes' mouths, but they're just not going to wear it. So, I think one of the things with the custom fabricated appliances, they had much better adoption, right? They were custom made to those athletes. Certainly working with professional athletes in the traditional sports leagues in the US and every country I've ever experienced, most of those teams have a team dentist. And so they're getting custom fabricated mouth guards anyway. So I think it was kind of like you couldn't, it's almost impossible to get professional athletes to use anything other than a custom fabricated mouth guard from their dentist. And, the teams and those players, I do believe, trust those team dentists, which is great. And from a performance standpoint, I think, the Under Armour products, I think the retail versions of those, the Boil and Fit versions, were a little bigger and bulkier, and I think a lot less comfortable than the custom fit, obviously.
For obviously, like, we know there's something there when it comes to performance and lower jaw position, and have published research in that area as well. Do you think that initial, before we move on to your current, just your current work, do you think that initial, was it more down to the running off a business compared to the actual product itself? So I think me and Umar had this conversation recently where we felt once it goes in the realms of like the business, it's very much down to like maybe volume sales and stuff. So it's not necessarily maybe down to the product itself not being able to do what it's doing. It's maybe more down to the business side of things. Do you think that was what happened to the Under Armour product, or what do you think was the sort of the barriers for it to succeed?
I think it's easy to put on the rear view mirror, right? And there were tons of unforced errors. I think the concept, certainly at that time, and, the mid 2006 to 2010, the concept of having an athletic mouth guard or mouthpiece to improve athletic performance, it was very foreign, right? If you say mouth guard to the average person, half of them think, boxing or sports, and half of them think teeth grinding, right? The idea that does more than protect your teeth is really hard to convince people. And so I think it was one of the, if I were going to summarize why it didn't work, it's very expensive to convince people to buy that. That was really a pre-social media era. So you didn't see, the athletes didn't have the marketability that they do now. They didn't have the platforms. They didn't have, and, working with traditional athletes, at that company, we never paid any athletes. They were investors in our company at the time. And I think the marketing dollars and effort to support that product for the price points that it was at just didn't line up.
Okay, very good.
So, I mean, that takes us now to where you're at AIRWAAV, and the inception of that was 2019. Is that right? You said it was 6 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. So can you just take us back to that time and kind of that situation where you'd left your previous company and you'd kind of boomerang back, like you said, to AIRWAAV, and how that inception came about, the ideas behind that, who's involved in that idea, and how things progressed to where we are now. So if you can just take us right back to the start and then kind of talk us through the last kind of 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And I think, two things you asked about are going to be hyper relevant to that. One is the business. So one of the things that happened at my previous company is after, other people got involved financially, they stopped funding research. And so, which was a critical part of the business. We had peer-reviewed studies back then, and the woman who did the research for the previous company, a woman named Dr. Dina Garner, PhD in exercise physiology, ran the human performance lab at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, which is a military academy, a very controlled environment, for human testing. You can get IRBs approved, probably much quicker than at other larger institutions. Dr. Garner called me and, actually said, "Hey, Bob, I know the company stopped funding research, but I kept doing research on this just as a personal passion." And one of the things she actually uncovered was that in the research, the Boil and Fit version of the product actually was performing better than the custom dental fit one. And that she was really intrigued with that. And it led her to a deep dive in clinical research. And what she started to realize was, what's the role that the tongue is playing in athletic performance? Obviously, the tongue is the largest obstruction in your airway, right? Oxygen fuels the body, fuels the muscles. And so she went really deep studying sleep apnea, actually, and the literature in sleep apnea, the relationship between clenching, tongue placement, and the impact on the airway. And, after that literature, it really led us to, so she called me and said, I have this. Would you be interested in, jumping back into sports dentistry, for lack of a better term? This has been a personal passion, again, ever since that life-changing moment in Dr. Mike Nanny's office. It's been a passion of mine to do that. And so I said, absolutely. And, that was really the start and the birth of AIRWAAV. Dr. Garner had actually submitted some publications on her own, totally self-funded literature, which, now peer-reviewed, published studies in very credible journals, showing an decrease, a lot of oxygen benefits, a decrease in respiratory rate of 20%. So from an athletic standpoint, imagine running on a treadmill at a steady state. I don't think you'd ever be at 100 breaths a minute, but for easy math, 100 breaths a minute, mouthpiece goes in, your respiratory rate drops 20%. You're at 80 breaths a minute, but your output stays the same. So you're now a more efficient athlete. A natural correlation to that was a 20% reduction in the production of lactic acid, which is the burn in your muscles, right? The fatigue, that you start hitting for a lot of endurance athletes at some point going lactic, where their muscles are hard to work. Another interesting study, Dr. Mark Rutger, who was one of the founding members of the Academy for Sports Dentistry in the state, he had discovered a study that was done in Japan in 2008 on rats. And it was a study where they had stressed out a bunch of rats, taped them all on their backs. They let half the rats bite on sticks and half the rats didn't. And after they tragically sacrificed them, found that the rats had 50% less cortisol in their systems, which cortisol is a stress hormone, lots of, negative implications for the human body. It's produced in excess when you're under physical, psychological, or emotional stress. And so Dr. Garner had done research and validated up to a 51% reduction of cortisol during exercise and stress, another one of the published studies. And so, we had this unbelievable bed of research that Dr. Garner had done. We had taken on the foundation of what we had learned previously. Really now with AIRWAAV, what we spend a lot of time trying to do is teach an athlete how to use their tongue. It's the genioglossus muscle, right? That, there's a physiological change that happens in the human body from clenching. And then if you get the tongue out of your airway, obviously your O2, CO2 exchange is going to improve. And there's an incredible cascade of benefits from that. So,
Yeah.
In 2019, we spent a couple years refining and developing the initial product that we launched. And then, we launched that late in the fall of 2019.
Yeah, the tongue's so important. I think a lot of it comes actually from our development and the lack of proper tongue function. It's the same way that people will need braces when they're younger. The tongue's not sitting on the palate to push the palate out and to develop the palate properly. And then once the palate's developed and the upper teeth are developed, the lower teeth are moving that lower jaw into position where they get a functional bite. And then that can also, you have that reduced space for the tongue, and the tongue can only go one direction. That's back in the airway, and things come from there. So it's so important. And from that, so that you've obviously done a lot of work with then looking at airway and stuff. You don't have a product then that would maybe link in with sleep for athletes as well? Because I think they go hand in hand. You've mentioned yourself with the research as well. There seems to be almost that we talk a lot about performance mouthguards, but we don't really, twin that up with sleep appliances for sleep disorders breathing that the athlete may have.
We actually have the AIRWAAV recovery product for sleep.
Okay.
So, I'll just to give you a little more on AIRWAAV, we launched with our initial product, which is called the PX1. It's an acronym for performance experience. It's more of a relaxed fit product. We initially launched in CrossFit. very focused on that community. It's obviously, it's an incredibly tight, what's that?
Have you had a pivot now to Hydrox? Because Hydrox is Hydrox is big. Is Hydrox
Hyrox,
big in the US? Hydrox has just took over in the
Hyrox,
UK.
Hyrox is crushing in the US too. So it is,
Yeah.
yeah, and Hyrox was really in its infancy right when we were launching. But yeah, if you were to do a search on Google Trends, the energy around CrossFit is like that, and the energy around
Mm.
Hyrox is
Yeah.
trend lines. We're big fans of both, but CrossFit is losing a lot of the energy in Hyrox is unbelievable. But
Yeah.
that high intensity interval training athlete, right? That, one of the things that's hard for, I think what, we wanted to market to an audience that knows their bodies so well that they would be able to articulate the difference the product made. And, we were fortunate enough that Rich Froning, who's the 4-time fittest man in the world, he's kind of the, Netflix did a whole documentary on his pursuit of that 4th title. We were fortunate enough that Rich's dentist had started to tell him he needed to start wearing just any mouth guard when he was working out because, like a lot of those, athletes, you're damaging your teeth. And so, we actually, showed up about that time. And so he was open to it for this notion, what his dentist was talking about. But when he started to read the science and understand the product, he was blown away to the point where his, kind of marketing partner called us and said, look, there are brands that, sponsor our program or sponsor Rich that I remind him to talk about. And he's reaching for your product. He wears your product every day. We have to work together. So we were very fortunate enough that Rich started to wear it. We developed a second version of the product shortly after for more endurance athletes that was designed to stay more snugly fit on the lower teeth. So, I could show a CAT scan to a lot of elite runners or triathletes and show how their airway is more open if they're clenching their teeth. They're never going to clench their teeth unless they have to, right? They're going to have a relaxed jaw. And so we wanted to have a product that you could still get your tongue down and forward out of the back of the airway and stay locked down on the teeth. And we started, 2 other things happened within our business. We do sell athletic mouth guards and dental products. And we had done some clinical sleep studies trying to just think more about snoring in an FD or sleep apnea and snoring. And one of the things that came back from that research is that our product, our technology was actually working better for fit people, which, snoring is usually old, out of shape guys like me, right? And, we were seeing this data.
My wife would disagree.
Well, we're stereotyping here.
Yeah.
So we had that, and then we had a ton of people, AirWAAV users, particularly with the PX2 model, which is our more tighter fitting version of the appliance, that were actually sleeping with the product and sharing these testimonials. And so we developed the AirWAAV RX1 recovery product specifically for sleep, and there's some really unique technology built into it. One, you can't, if we're teaching athletes how to use your tongue during the day, you can't control that muscle at night. So one of the things we did, we always asked people, what do you do if you get a popcorn kernel stuck in your teeth? What does your tongue do?
Finds it.
Yes, it's like as a natural response to foreign objects, right? So it's going to find that and keep picking at it till that, popcorn kernel is gone. So we built some little bumps into the underside of our intake bar to trick the tongue into thinking that they're popcorn kernels. And then there's a lot of published literature that shows the tongue has a reflex, not unlike your knee, that if you hit your knee and your foot goes forward, when you touch the sides of your tongue, it wants to lurch forward as well. So we built that technology into the sides of that product. And so we call it reflex technology. We're just trying to help,
it's probably similar to the gag reflex. I always put down, like, people with really bad gag reflexes have really poor airways. That's what I think. We see patients all the time. Some people will be fine and other people will have really bad gag reflexes, but I always feel it's due to, it's almost like an airway protective mechanism that the tongue has. Yeah, so that's interesting there. Yeah.
So anyway, so we launched that product, and there's a lot of dentists that actually recommend it to their patients for teeth grinding, for sleep apnea or snoring. We do not do that at all. We don't make any medical claims. We created that product to help athletes and really any competitive professional wake up more refreshed. The same thing applies, like recovery has become such a trend. If you look at breathing performance, that was a big trend. Sleep performance and recovery is off the charts. It's something every athlete is focused on. For collegiate level athletes, it's the one part of their lives that a college or university can't control, right? How do you get more sleep? And so we've seen some pretty incredible, we're going to do a deeper study on this fall. The Whoop data that athletes are sharing with us, that people give us the testimonials. We had a Division I pitcher at Abilene Christian, kid named Cade McGarr. I had met his dad at the American Baseball Coaches Association, and he bought the product for his son at the show, and I got a panicked call from him 4 weeks later he said, my son had been throwing 90, 91 miles an hour. He threw 94, 95 in his first outing wearing AIRWAAV, the PX1 product, but he put it after the game, he put it in the back of his, trousers, and it went through the wash and it melted. And he's like, he's got a live outing on Tuesday. How do I I need another one right away. And that was a really fun story. But what was great is Cade actually was obsessed with sleep and Whoop, and had been tracking his recovery score in the Whoop app for 14 months. And, so we gave him an AIRWAAV recovery to try as well. And he had sent me the data 2 weeks later. And he said, here's the 3 days, the scores before. And the recovery score was 40 or 45. It was in the 40s and in the yellow. And then it was between 85 and 95 the first 5 days after. And it was funny. I was just at the National Strength and Conditioning Association trade show, and I had a little chart of that, and probably 3 or 4 people stopped by and said, "Oh my God, that's exactly my score." I had the same thing happen when I was trying the appliance. And so that's to where you started with that question, have we done anything with sleep? It has become a really incredible product, and nothing is more satisfying than getting that testimonial or that review of somebody that's life-changing for people, as either for the individual for performance reasons or little relief to the significant other.
Yeah. I used to wear a Whoop, but I was so sick of seeing 0% after a out.
That comes on to my next question, is that are these products tailoring it towards the more elite athletes, unlike John, the people who are kind of near the top of their game? Is that where you're seeing the biggest difference?
It's interesting. When you're launching the brand, it's important to have credibility, right? Those elite athletes bring a ton of credibility. So what I love is that, the 2 fittest men in the world right now both wear AIRWAAV, James Sprague, Dallin Pepper. We have, if you go, the CrossFit Games are actually in the States this weekend, and I'm guessing a quarter of those athletes will be wearing AIRWAAV, right? That is ultimate validation that the athletes who are making their living based on how they perform and compete and train are using that product when it matters most. The world's strongest man each of the last 3 years has worn AIRWAAV. Jesus Oliveira set the all-time world record for powerlifting wearing AIRWAAV. All 3 podium athletes for world's strongest man this year were wearing AIRWAAV when they won those competitions. So, that validation is really important. And we love supporting those sports, powerlifting, all those strength sports. But, we get emails from baggage handlers that say, this product's changed my life. Right. They're basically lifting weights all day for a job. They're just, it's luggage instead of, weights in a gym. We get emails from accountants that, swear by our product, wear it all day during tax season and wear it at night just to have that, that physiological change from clenching. By the way, it's centuries old, right? In the US, that expression, bite the bullet, was born during the Civil War. If a soldier was going to have surgery without anesthesia, hey, bite this bullet, which was, round and malleable back then. taking advantage of that physiological change. So I think it's very relevant. Obviously, any elite athlete who's training or competing to get better, whether you are, the super competitive ones, it makes total sense. But anybody who's in the gym, we get a lot of people that, might be 30, 40 years old and say, I keep lifting, but I've plateaued, or it's harder to build muscle as I get older. And, we talk about our mission is to just help any athlete achieve something better, right? Whether you're the CEO of a company, that's trying to get, or, even doctors, you guys, surgeons, right? They're athletes, right? Your job, it's very taxing. You're on your feet, you're doing healthcare. Like, if we can help those people improve their job, either because they got a better night's sleep or they're less stressed out, that, we love that. So again, if you were to look at AIRWAAV's marketing, you're going to see lots of the fittest people and strongest people in the world. But I'm sure there's a lot of everyday people like myself that are the ones, buying and using the products.
I was looking at the athletes that you had, and you had Tom Stoltman. Now, Tom Stoltman's Scottish, and
Yes.
he's won the world's strongest man a few times, and that kind of suit. And I met Tom when I was at the Scotland rugby match last year, and the size of that guy, holy moly, he is humongous. Not just in width, but in height as well. You actually don't realize how tall he is. So if you look at the products there, so the PX1, you're kind of targeting that more to kind of hit athletes or CrossFit athletes. PX2, more endurance, and then you've got your recovery one overnight. And I think for athletes, wearing something in the mouth, it's not that difficult, really, if you think about it. You're not asking to do much. Having something in the mouth, a lot of patients do sometimes feel it takes a little bit of getting used to. But like anything, the more that you wear it, the more that you get used to it. And if you are seeing an improvement, however much that is, then they're more inclined to wear something like that. A question I've got for you is, it's maybe more of a dental question, but you might know the answer to it, is if the athlete has missing posterior teeth, obviously a lot of this is based on having the appliance covering the occlusal surfaces of the posterior teeth. If they're missing posterior teeth, how does that affect the appliance then?
So we will always refer questions like that to say, ask your dentist, because as you guys know, it's very case specific, right? In most cases, we do have a dentist who's been on the team. And when we would ask him those questions, in most cases, he said, hey, as long as, that it's the teeth are covering or in between those plates, right? And, we're trying to get as much of the molar contact with the plate as possible, that would be okay for that individual athlete, but it is case by case. And the one thing I'll say with the two products, I talked about, that was kind of the way we launched them. It's really a matter of preference. So Tom Stoltman wears the PX2, right? Rain O'Neill, who won World's Strongest Man this year, wears the PX2. Mitchell Hooper, who won it the year before, wears the PX1. So for most athletes, it's really just preference. It's like relaxed fitting or tight fitting jeans. We've just found that I think most strength athletes, could use either one. I think, runners and endurance athletes are where I think they do tend to lean to PX2, but it's just preference for most athletes.
Always loose fitting jeans, first of all. Second of all, just
John, for you, it's loose fitting jeans and tight fitted top. That's for you.
Yeah. Just can we go into the products themselves then a little bit? So there's 3 main products. We've got PX1, PX2, and then the recovery, which is the sleep product. So presuming that PX1, PX2 can either be on the upper arch or the lower arch.
They are all lower arch appliances, so they all fit on the lower teeth.
So even the recovery appliance, because normally sleep appliances will be an upper and a lower, so we can control sort of the lower jaw, preventing it from dropping back posteriorly whenever the muscles relax when we're sleeping. So your recovery one is also just a lower arch appliance?
Yes. Yep. So they're all on the things that they all share are the, what we call the bite plate and the intake bar, which, is deliberately sits right on the inside of your teeth. That is really the guide, like, hey, teach you where to put your tongue.
So you've got 2 aspects. So you've got the bite, so it's the bite plates and the bar,
intake,
what's that? The intake bar. So
bar,
can you explain them a little bit just for our listeners and stuff that aren't?
Yeah, the intake bar is on the inside of your, right on the kind of inside of your back teeth, and it's almost like a little lead that is
Okay.
it's a guide to teach you where to place your
Not
tongue.
so the tongue. That's to help place the tongue above it. So you're placing the
Below
tongue
it,
above the ledge, or you're
below the
placing
ledge,
the tongue below the ledge.
below the ledge, down and forward. Yep.
Down, so you're putting the tongue down and forward.
Yes.
Okay, because a lot of people, you get a lot of teachers, especially with the likes of myofunctional therapy and stuff, and they would talk about putting the tongue up on the roof of your palate, so up and forward. But with this product, we're trying to teach the tongue to stay down and forward.
Yes. And I think that is what if you actually dive deep into the sleep apnea research, the relationship between the tongue and what happens when you do clench, and that's naturally where it goes. It's a much less stressful position for your tongue. And you can just if you put your tongue down and forward into kind of the bottom of your gums where your teeth meet there versus on the roof of your mouth, you'll feel the difference in the energy. We hear a lot of that research. We're not suggesting putting the tongue up isn't what's right. Our research has been done with all the peer-reviewed published research on the product has been done with the tongue down and forward.
It's interesting because a lot of the up and forward isn't focused around athletic performance. So I think that's
Correct.
the big difference here as well. That I think that's what we've got to keep in the mindset that a lot of times in other products, what we're doing is we're trying to mirror what we do in, say, treating the TMJ joints for pain, or we're treating occlusion, and we're presuming then that's going to help athletic performance because we're putting things in a better position. But from your aspect, you have been looking at it solely from athletic performance point of view.
Yeah, we are not focused at all on, again, we're not trying to solve medical problems. We are trying to help athletes and, people who live like athletes wake up feeling refreshed and perform better in whatever they're doing.
What's the bar called? Insertion? No,
The
what did you
intake
call
bar.
it?
The
Intake
intake
bar.
bar. Yep.
Bar. So it's to train the tongue to position correctly, and then you've got the bite planes. And what's the concept behind the bite planes? What are they trying to achieve?
So that's really, helping accentuate that physiological change from clenching. So
Okay.
Florida Southern College did a study, completely independent, no funding from us, looking at bat swing speed for baseball, collegiate baseball and softball players. And what they found was if you clench hard, your bat swing speed in baseball or softball would increase. When you were clenching with AIRWAAV, it increased even more. And so that incremental change is from that plate and the contact that we're making on the molars.
Sorry, just the plate sits just on the molar teeth at the back, or does it go forward in the premolars? How far?
It
Or,
goes up, to the just to the premolars.
okay. So okay. So like almost just from behind the canine backwards, then. So that's where the
Correct.
plate goes. Cool. And that's to try to improve the physiological position on clenching.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And then
And that,
just the differences between PX1, PX2, and the sleep. Then what is it? What
yep.
is it? Different thicknesses of the plate, or what? How do you?
So the plate is the same in all of them. The PX2 integrates more of the fitting material on both sides of the molars, as well as what we would call giving it a little more structure to that material so that it just, as you fit the material and onto your back teeth, which, you can boil and fit them like the old mouth guards. We have a patented fitting material that actually allows you to microwave it, which is a lot more convenient. Certainly for a lot of there's dentists that actually, will actually fit them in their offices for some of their patients. And that when you are, that just having more of that material helps it stay locked down. That material actually shrinks 24 hours after you form it. And so it helps form really, arguably as good of a fit as any custom appliance, just because it's not just vacuumed on, it's actually shrinking onto your teeth.
Sorry, do you have to wear the appliance while it shrinks?
No. So, with our fitting instructions, we encourage people to keep it in their mouth for about 5 minutes after they form it. just to get a feel for it. And then, we will tell people, don't judge how it fits right when you fit it. Wait till the next day and then try to fit it.
Okay.
And that material actually can be remolded over and over again. It works with braces. So, if, for example, it doesn't quite feel right on one side, you can just reheat that one side and remold it until you get that perfect fit.
So the main difference between PX1 and PX2 is the fitting, is
Correct.
the fitting, the amount of the fit material. And then the difference then from the recovery appliance, what
The recovery
makes it different
appliance.
from the PX?
Yep, the recovery appliance integrates what we call reflex technology. Those some bumps on the product to trick your tongue, and then the I guess bumps, for lack of a better term, on the inside of the product to touch the sides of the tongue to get that natural reaction. And I think, to your question on the sleep part, a lot of upper and lower appliances, I think, obviously if you're trying to move the mandible forward, those kind of appliances do that. What we hear oftentimes is people wake up with sore jaws and they're uncomfortable, or that ends up on their pillow or the bedstand because it was like the pain that it caused was almost worse than the problem they're solving. And so I think, like most sleeps, I don't know what you guys would say. In my experience, most nighttime oral appliances have about a 33% efficacy rate. The number one selling snoring product on Amazon has 3.2 stars, right? Like that's the best, right? It's a really complicated issue. And so, for that person who, if their jaws open, hopefully we can still help the tongue move. But, if that jaw drops, the airway isn't going to be as open as it would if that jaw was forward. But still, if we can help get that tongue out of the way, it's going to improve that airflow even a little bit.
All these products are self-fit. They're all,
Yeah.
and they're boil and bite or microwave. What I quite find it interesting, how were you able to develop the customer instructions for getting them to self-fit it ideally
Well,
as
as you
possible?
know, that's really hard, right?
Yeah.
We have gone through several iterations of our fitting video. We have lots of tips and tricks. It's really hard, right? We try to carefully walk people through a step-by-step process. And it's funny, for as many people that see the athletes, we still have to remind people it doesn't fit on the top, because an athlete who grew up wearing a mouth guard may naturally think that's where it fits.
Yeah.
We prefer to have gravity working on our side. And so the lower teeth is where we have focused for all our products.
So athletes who are wearing protective mouth guards on the upper obviously can still wear the appliance on the lower. So you kind of giving them kind of both in a way. Is that what you'd advocate?
We don't. I mean, that would be athlete preference. We have typically said, for if you have to wear a mouth guard, I think it would start to get uncomfortable and bulky. It'd be just too much in an athlete. Again, what I said, if it's uncomfortable, an athlete's not going to wear it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we have never encouraged anybody who's wearing a athletic mouth guard for protection to complement this. What we will say is, when you go to the gym and work out or train for that sport, that's when you should have this in your mouth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, because I was like, how are you going to fit both in? But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Now that makes more sense. We're in a a unique position here where we've got a lot of listeners from all over the world, different countries. And with you saying that it's appliance that can be fitted in the dental surgery, it's obviously you heat it up with a microwave or something similar. What would you say to the dentists that are listening and are thinking about maybe this is beneficial for their patients and for the athletes or for themselves? Because a lot of sports dentists are athletes themselves. So something that, if I can lift a bit heavier in the gym, or if I can do a little bit more running and cycling, then, something I'm interested in as well. What would you say to those dentists in terms of kind of going forward? How would you speak to athletes about it? What would you recommend to them?
Yeah. And I'll actually answer that by sharing things that dentists say to me about it and why they love the product. So what we hear the most from dentists is, one, they love the fact that we are very focused on research and science, that we have peer-reviewed publications. We have, a history of this research to prove what we've done. So that first and foremost. Second, they love that, like most dentists, hey, you're building relationships with your patients as you're learning about them, and you learn they're into sports, or they're into, they're a triathlete or a runner or cyclist. It becomes an incredible product that, they can talk about. It's very fun. Most people, when they learn about this, are like, I never knew that I could, wear something to help me improve that point of passion. Obviously, sleep is a whole nother issue that so many docs, identify sleep issues with their patients, and it's a really complicated thing to solve. And so if they can, for lack of a better term, prescribe or recommend this product to a patient, there's a lot of them selling them right in their offices. It's a lot less chair time. There's not 2 visits for impressions. There's no lab fee. They walk out the door for we have dentists who actually will prescribe it for patients as co-therapy for their, if they're using a CPAP, or if they've custom fit their product for a patient that, it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks before they actually get their appliance set and returned. And here's something, for $50, you walk out the door, wear this in the interim until you have that other appliance. And, and again, we're finding a lot of success helping people in a lot of different ways just with those products in general. So I think those are, for any dentist looking to grow their business or just better connect with their patients, it serves a lot of different roles.
How do you find, if we're talking about business then, how do you find, we spoke about working with these elite athletes, how do you find from a business perspective, do you feel that you're going to be competing with athletes that do wear protective mouthguards? So for the likes of, we talked about Mark Ruckda in Minnesota. Is Minnesota, that's where Mark is, isn't it? Well, Minnesota is also where Bevent is, which has got very big with World Rugby, and myself and Umar, we help with the fitting out of the rugby players with the Bevent, with the intelligent mouthguards. So they're all elite athletes. From your product point of view, then that's all, you're almost competing with the protective mouthguard because we're trying to get the same athlete to wear a mouthpiece, even though it's a completely different product. Do you find that's a challenge?
I don't see it as so. That athlete, I would always err on the side of protection first, right? If you're playing rugby or you're playing a sport that requires a mouth guard or recommends a mouth guard, you should be wearing that mouth guard to protect your teeth, right? Like, first and foremost, we do actually sell a protective athletic mouth guard that's made out of our patented fitting material. We launched it for jiu-jitsu athletes in particular who are more concerned about a really slim fitting, ultra tight, some protection. So we do have that product. We're not actively out trying to sell it, to rugby people. So for that, in that rugby case, I don't feel like I'm competing with that person because they're going to wear that mouth guard when they're competing.
Even any contact sport, like if you're looking at for the performance aspect, we chatted about how we're looking at the performance aspect of getting that tongue down and forward, and also the bite planes. But then you probably can't use the same sort of technology to get that tongue down and forward with an upper appliance, the same way you can do with the lower plans. So then do you find that to get that performance, we need to have that aspect on the lower plans? But then if we've got athletes that are wearing protective mouth guards, how can you provide that performance benefit to them without them risking losing that protection from wearing an upper mouth guard?
Yeah. I would say 2 things. One, we get asked by lots of athletes and teams and organizations, do we have a version of our technology in a protective mouth guard for athletes like you're talking about? And we don't. We have never wanted to, that isn't our market. So that athlete you're talking about, our product is relevant when he or she is training in the gym to go compete in that sport. You could look at our marketing. We've never spent a penny marketing to protective athletes or athletes that have to wear protective mouth guards. We did a little campaign for football to say offensive linemen or football players are basically power lifters in the off season. So they should be lifting with our mouthpiece in their mouths. but we would never encourage an athlete to risk dental injury at the expense of trying to get the performance benefits that our product provides.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is not so much that. What I'm trying to say is how can we look at them athletes and provide that performance aspect without taking away the protectiveness of their current mouth guard? You know what I mean? It's almost like if this is going to be really beneficial for the athlete, then ideally they should be wearing it when they're performing, but then we can't apply that technology on the upper arch. So we've seen, me and Umar's had a discussion before about, I don't think they're great, but the double mouth guard that you see some athletes wear, is that what we're maybe looking at as an aspect where we have the protectiveness, but also we're able to provide that performance technology through the lower arch?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of products. You can go back to research in the 1970s. Dr. Mark Rutger wrote the Modern Sports Dentistry textbook, talks about the history of this. Dentists, just that wearing any regular mouth guard will have some impact on performance. There were team dentists for NFL in the 70s doing research to show an improvement in muscular endurance or strength. And so I think there's a lot of different mouth guards that actually today will make more specific performance claims. We don't make any performance claims unless we have done research to validate those claims on our product specifically. So it could be down the road we decide to try to work on a version ourselves, but I would encourage people to say, hey, what are the products out there? Which of those products have the most research to support the claims they're making? And that's what I would recommend. If they're looking for that boost through that product, that's what I would encourage them to do, with the caveat knowing that the hardest thing about mouth guards is they have to be really comfortable. And the more there's a lot of mouth guards with the measurement technology in them. And, we're looking at all kind of diagnostics through that. The reality is if it gets big and bulky, that the athlete's just not going to wear it. And then it's not doing anybody any good, right? If it's uncomfortable or big, they're going to chew on it and it's not protecting their teeth.
Yeah. So I've had this conversation as well with, there's an Irish guy who's not a dentist, but he's developed a direct-to-print 3D protective mouth guard. And I've sort of said to him, like, you've got a direct-to-print 3D mouth guard that you feel is more protective than EVA, but you're like looking to put that into an athlete that's wearing technology in their mouth guard, but you're not actually competing because that's not your aspect, and then it's the same with yourselves where you have an aspect where you can improve performance. So there's almost like 3 different products that are not competing with each other because they're all doing different things, but the athlete's only able to wear one of them at any one time. Do you know what I mean? So that's sort of the disappointing thing, where like the benefits from all 3 products can't be incorporated so that athlete can get the best out of all 3 products because they're all doing different things.
Yeah. Well, the good news is we actually, we can solve it all with AIRWAAV, because we have our athletic mouth guard. I know people can't see it on the camera. I'll show you guys. That looks like a custom fit mouth guard from a dentist. It's actually the AIRWAAV GX1 mouth guard, made out of our patented material that absorbs twice the impact of EVA, which study that was done independent of our product. So that's a product that, you can have a 2 millimeter mouth guard be as protective as a 4 millimeter custom fit EVA that actually fits as well or even tighter. That shrinking tight fit, that mouth guard is the only mouth guard in the history of mouth guards to get the American Dental Association seal of acceptance. They for 3 years really battled with this, and it was that shrinking aspect that gives you a true custom fit that actually got them to grant the seal. We don't market that seal in conjunction with the AIRWAAV brand, but it's a really compelling product. So I would like to say, in a very fun way, that athlete, that rugby player, could use our GX1 mouth guard on the field and use our PX1 or PX2 when he's training in the weight room, and wear our RX1 recovery when he's sleeping.
Yeah, that takes us on quite nicely to what does the future hold then. So you've obviously discussed quite a few products that you guys have got, and I see that you've got these nasal strips as well. So What does the future hold for AIRWAAV? What sort of products? Obviously, you probably can't tell us too much, but what are you kind of looking at just now? What should we be looking out for? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, I think, we are hyper focused on our mission. As I said, we are trying to help that athlete or people who live like competitive athletes to improve their performance, whether that's, in the workouts or in the training they're doing or at sleep. So, nasal strips, our nasal strips are a little bit unique where, obviously there's a lot of different nasal strips out there, more often used in sleep. The complaint with a lot of nasal strips is they come off when you're working out and sweating a lot. So our nasal strips have what I would describe as an enhanced adhesive. So the good news is they don't come off when you're working out. And the bad news is they don't come off when you're working out. So, if you're using them for sleep, we're very careful to say, make sure you wear it into the shower and get it wet. And
Yeah.
be careful because if you have,
It's like getting your ankle strapped and then you try to take it off later.
yeah, because if you have, sensitive skin, you got to be careful. We're looking at, what are the ways. I think in any product, you guys know better than anybody. Oral appliances are really hard to make, to be comfortable, to fit well, to get people to wear. We are always looking for ways to make our products fit and function better. How do we, are there things we can add to tweak? So I think, we will have iterations of our products to, that could either go into more nuanced sports specific kind of applications, and then adding complementary products that the nasal strips, we're kind of like our core mouthpieces address the plumbing in your airway. Well, if you're nasal breathing, that's part of your plumbing too. So that was a natural extension. So I think, that we're very focused on the mouthpieces and making the best, most comfortable, most scientifically proven and efficacious mouthpieces ever. And that's where you'll see the focus. I think we've been asked enough that solving that mouthguard question is something it's a problem we'd love to solve, right?
Yeah. It's a question that's been there for decades. Nobody's found the answer. So it's a really interesting topic, especially when, as you said, you experienced it yourself and I've experienced it. And once you've experienced it and you've seen how other athletes have seen the difference as well, it's really an interesting topic. And it's great that you're doing quite a lot of research and work into it.
Yeah, that is a pillar in our company. We will always be research focused in everything we do with our products.
Yeah, I think it's important because people want to see evidence, and it's all very well saying where this is going to improve your strength or endurance, but it was like, okay, where's the evidence? I need to see some sort of research with it. So that's great that you'd said that it was Dina, right? Dina Gardner, who was in the military academy. She was had a lot of interest in it, and then she kind of contacted you, and that's how it kind of unfolded. So it's one of these things where we watch the space. I think as the sports industry family grows and as we continue to grow, there's a lot of new associations that are coming out, and athletes then start to ask us, okay, what is it? I've heard about this and I've heard about that. What can we do? Or they might ask us, look, I'm looking to improve my sleep or whatever. And it's, we need to, we're unbiased on this podcast. We want to try and give people an opportunity to discuss their products and asking questions about it. Like, John's, he knows a lot about mouthguards because a lot of this stuff he's done in the past is to do with that. So when it comes to these sort of products, I like him take the lead, but then I like to ask other sort of questions. So firstly, thanks very much for agreeing to come on. It's been really insightful. I think it's something that I'll certainly look into if it can help me with my training, and that'd be great. And I think if Tom Stoltman can wear one, then I'm sure I can wear one as well. And and so that's kind of got me with him being Scottish. But yeah, I think
if you were one Umar and you're able to hit a 6, then it's definitely high performance.
Well, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Umar is a big cricket player, Bob. So he's touring Brazil. He's touring Brazil later in the year. So if he starts putting up big scores wearing the AIRWAAV, then it's definitely got a performance benefit.
We'll be cracking the stats.
Yeah, I'll definitely plug that. That's for sure, Bob. No, but that's been great. I think it's been really kind of you to take the time to speak to us, and hopefully we'll put links to AIRWAAV as well so people can make their own decisions on it too. and then they can have a look at it. But if there's any other information that you want to give to us to put out there, we're more than happy to do that for you as well. So that's no problem.
Really appreciate it. And then, as I said, love what you guys are doing, sports dentistry. Hopefully we'll continue to help all athletes.
Yeah,
So
great.
I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you,
Yeah, it
guys.
was great. Great. Thanks very much for your time.
We are delighted to have Ionate as a sponsor for the Sports Dentistry podcast. Are you looking for a water bottle that's built to keep up with your active lifestyle? Look no further than Ionate, the totally leak-proof water bottles with triple lock technology to prevent spills no matter where you're headed. With a simple one-touch opening mechanism, you can sip on the go without hassle. Plus, Ionate's sleek, modern designs are not only functional but can be personalized just for you. Made from high-quality steel, these bottles are easy to clean and best of all, they're sustainable. From 320 mils to 1200 mils, Ionate has the perfect size for you, whether you're just out for a jog or going on a long hike. And it doesn't stop at water bottles. Ionate also has travel mugs and flasks to keep your drinks just right wherever you are. Ionate is the official water bottle supplier to the British and Irish Lions on their tour to Australia this summer, and are the official water bottle supplier to the NFL, so you know you're getting the best. I have been using their bottles for a long time now and cannot recommend them highly enough. So head over to www.ionate.co.uk to get your hands on the best bottles in the business, bar none. Now back to the pod.
So that was a really interesting conversation. It really opened my eyes a little bit to being a little bit more open-minded, especially when we were having that conversation about tongue posture and where they're looking to put the tongue, because it's completely different from the concept that I use, which is get the tongue up on the palate. I would even tell patients that if they find themselves clenching and grinding their stress, to push their tongue behind their two front teeth and try to push that tongue up to hopefully help drop the jaw into a more relaxed position. But so it's really interesting to hear this different concept and how that has an impact, and where it's more focused on like tongue posture and airway than it is actually on tooth-to-tooth contact or tooth-to-appliance contact. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, the good old saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I think just with their research, and, Bob had talked about how Dr. Dina Gardner had done quite a lot of research with regards to how they were going to try and make this mouth guard and her background in the military. And when she approached Bob and was like, look, I've been doing a little bit of research behind the scenes, quite keen to get you involved and see what your thoughts are on it. So, because people want to see evidence, don't they? People are saying, okay, you've got this mouthpiece, different varieties of it. So you obviously talk about the PX1, the PX2, the difference between the two just being that one's slightly rigid and the other one is slightly a bit more loose fitting. It's just a personal preference to what the athlete wants to wear. And then he's got the recovery one as well. So it was quite good to kind of get the background in terms of the knowledge base to be able for them to provide enough evidence to say, okay, look, this is the mouth guard. This is the sort of things that we've incorporated into it. This is the benefits of it. And again, I'm not going to sit there and say, yep, it's the gospel and what they're saying is absolutely true, because everybody needs to make their own decisions on it. We've asked Bob if he would be able to give us a discount code that we can give to our listeners so they're able to then buy the product and they can try it for themselves, because many of the people who listen to this podcast are athletes and they sport they do or running or endurance sort of activities that they do, they'll be able to try it for themselves and see how it works. And if it's something that they feel they're quite comfortable with giving it to their patients, then we could be onto something here. And I think it's something that we both want to try. I mean, you had a discussion and saying, look, it's all very well getting Bob on and talking about it, but I think we should try it ourselves, because we are into that sort of fitness and endurance and hit training and you're hurling and all that stuff. So I think it's worthwhile trying it out and giving our honest feedback on the product, because I really liked what you were saying. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thought Bob came across very well. He's very knowledgeable. He's not a dentist himself, but he's very knowledgeable in terms of the products and what they're there for. And when he started naming the athletes that they've got on board, the one that stood out for me was Tom Stoltman, because he's Scottish and he's won the world's strongest man, I think it's 3 or 4 times. And I was like, yeah, man, I can get on board with that.
Shows you just how common it is with World's Strongest Men. So there's definitely something there with our bite and our ability to clench and strength, or else, it wouldn't have stayed with World's Strongest Men. I've seen numerous times, again, when we're talking about how little sport was on TV, you always get the World's Strongest Man on Channel 5. It usually comes on sometimes it goes on around Christmas, so you end up watching it. And it's quite interesting, but it was really interesting to see how many of them are actually wearing something in their mouth. And they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't think there was some sort of edge or advantage there. So it's really interesting to show you how there's definitely something there between our bite and our clench and strength, while that's our ability to maybe, I know we've talked about it before, the Japanese have looked into the ability to clench and how that links into neck strength. And we've talked about it as well with performance mouth guards, maybe looking at putting the head in a better position so our shoulders are more aligned, so we can take off any sort of negative impact on our posture, which would let us perform optimally. But there's definitely something there. So it's really interesting. Like, you have all these examples, but you can see just with this type of product where the athletes fitting it themselves and they're finding an advantage, you can see how popular it could get. So I think that's really interesting, the type of athletes. Also, I spoke about it briefly in that conversation with Bob. Their main focus is on the lower jaw, and maybe that's why it's getting really popular with the likes of CrossFit and World's Strongest Man and these non-contact sort of sports. And that could be a challenge as well, as how do you get the performance benefits that are built into these appliances at the moment into a protective mouthguard. And this is a conversation I have a lot of times with different mouthguard providers. It's almost like they're competing for the same athlete, but their products aren't competing with each other. So you may have, so the example I would use is, and maybe we'll get James onto the podcast because he's got a really interesting story as well, as how he developed a direct-to-print 3D mouthguard, impact mouthguards, and the design of the honeycomb and having like air pockets and stuff in the mouthguard, and his testing is showing, and there's testing being done on Ohio State at the moment, with the support of the American Academy of Sports Dentistry, looking at EVA and the performance of EVA, reducing force compared to these 3D printed mouthguards. And James's product and design is performing better than EVA, so sort of supporting the research they've done themselves, which is quite interesting. But he's competing, so he's an ex-Leinster Rugby Academy player, so he's got a good contract with Leinster. So, but his main USP is that it's really protective. And then you've got the same Leinster Rugby player that's been told by World Rugby that he needs to wear tack in his mouthguard so they can monitor head concussion. But that's not competing with what James does, because James is focusing on protection.
Yeah.
And the tack's different. And then now we're talking about looking at putting a bite into the mouthguard, or looking at putting some sort of emphasis on the lower jaw and where it's positioned, which again is not competing with the tack, which is monitoring concussion, or the protection aspect of the mouthguard. But all these three different products are looking to be put into the same athlete. So it's trying to maybe look at that challenge of how can we combine all them three benefits: the benefits of the protection, the benefits of the tack in the mouthguard, the benefits of occlusion and the performance aspects of it, all into the same mouthguard or mouth appliance, so that athlete can get the best of all three options. Does that make sense? It's like,
that makes sense. And I think that was something important that we discussed with Bob, to say, I think he was actually the one to say that this is strictly a lower mouthpiece. We're not interested. We've not once have we said this is going to be a protective mouthpiece. So he's very clear on that. Yes, they do have other upper appliances that he's mentioned that is protective, but the ones that we were discussing there, the PX1, the PX2, and the recovery one, is a lower mouthpiece, which has nothing to do with protection. But obviously our main objective and one of the pillars of sports dentistry is prevention. Prevention comes in ideally a custom made mouthguard. And the three elements that you've discussed, as time goes on, as technology improves, I think we will see the kind of ultimate all-in-one mouthguard that has all three disciplines in it. But until technology advances, the tech and the chips get smaller in the instrument in mouthguards, we're able to transfer the bite into an upper mouthguard similar to what Anil had said before. I think it'll just take time. I think we don't want to push it too early and be in a position where someone comes up with the ideal super mouthguard, but it's not actually doing its purpose. And the main purpose of a mouthguard, an upper one, is protection. From there, technology needs to get better, it needs to improve. But there's scope there, like you said, there's three aspects of it. They will twine and mingle together until somebody is able to come up with something. But I think it's a watch this space, certainly with regards to that.
Yeah, it shows you how there's still a lot more development to go. So we really don't want to put an athlete in a position where they got to choose between performance, protection, or tack. They can't want them to have where they can have the best of all three. So that's definitely shows you just how far now. I know from first producing mouthguards, things have changed so much, just even from the design of a protective mouthguard, and now with this whole new aspect of looking at the performance side of things, when we talked about with Anil with using like an upper mouthguard to change the lower jaw position, and now just this conversation with Bob where they're doing different aspects in the lower jaw that they're noticing is improving performance. So it's just going to be really interesting how mouthguards and everything develops over the next 5, 10, 20 years and see where we are. So it just shows you there's still an area, a knowledge gap there, maybe that we need to be able to combine all these aspects.
Yeah, and I think one of the unique things that he discussed was in the range is the recovery one, the recovery lower mouthpiece, because that's something that I think a lot of people, not just athletes, just your average Joe public, would be interested in, because if they're saying that it can help with sleep, and they can say it would help with other things as well, and a lot of people do have problems with sleeping and sleep apnea, and then we start getting into the world of sleep apnea and the appliances that's involved with that. I know it opens up another can of worms, but if I'm just taking it for something that's non-intrusive, relatively good cost, there's no harm in trying it, because what's the worst that can happen is that you just go back to not wearing it. But certainly if you can buy something that doesn't mean you need to go and have a scan taken by your dentist, or you don't have to get impressions taken by your dentist. You can buy this online, kind of like you say, the boil and bite sort of instructions that comes with it. Try it, see how it feels. It might work, it might not, but if it does, then it's money well spent. And if it doesn't, then you've said, okay, maybe that's not for me. But I like that aspect of it. I thought the fact that they're targeting that as well is something really unique, because it's not something they've really kind of heard of. And you've talked a lot about on the podcast about how sleep is so important, not when you're away on your gallivanting and on the conferences worldwide, because you don't get much sleep there, but in your normal life, sleep is super, super important, and it does fuel recovery, definitely. And there's a lot of studies to show that that's true, and you can't beat a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it's massive. Now, that was the reason I stopped wearing the whoop, because after every late night, I was getting zero recovery. I started getting too many zero recoveries. I was like, I'm better off not knowing.
Yeah. Fair enough. No, definitely.
But sleep is really important, and it is like an under sort of studied area in dentistry as a whole. Sleep dentistry is still a very new sort of area, and it's not at the stage where every dental practice is offering it. It still seems to be down to a small group that have an interest in that area, where it should really come down to like just a normal option for every dental practice, providing it for patients. But then if we look at it from an athlete perspective, there's a whole sleep dentistry and the athlete and athletic performance. That's something that hasn't been looked at, to my knowledge, at all. And we know from all the other medical professionals that work with athletes about how important sleep is, whether that's the sports medicine doc or whether it's the performance lead talking about how important it is for recovery and being able to perform. it's known. It's just like a golden rule about how important sleep and recovery is for athletic performance. So to be able to look at the sleep dentistry aspect and whether it has a role there, that's a really interesting area, and it's an area I'd like to see more of us trying to get a wee bit more information and research into.
Yeah, I think it's something we should look at getting a guest on who specializes in sleeping athletes and see what their take on it is and what they recommend and what they see from a non-dental perspective. I mean, just so we can kind of give a more round approach, not just completely focusing on the dentist, but obviously we know that sleep apnea and trouble sleeping is a lot to do with the tongue falling back. Yes, I get that. But what else can we provide our patients and our athletes with regards to sleep? How can we help improve their sleep away from dentistry? Is there something that we're missing? Is there something that we can work together with a little bit more and see, can we work together to provide the athlete the best possible option of having the best possible sleep? I think that would be an interesting conversation to have, because there must be something there that we do know a little bit about, but would be really useful to have somebody who specializes in that area to give us a little bit more information. So maybe watch this space. We can probably have a look at that. Maybe we can have a discussion off here and see if we can get something with it. Because I think that would be something that a lot of the listeners would be quite keen on listening, and myself included. I'd love to know how to sleep better, and I don't want to rely on I don't have a Whoop band, but I wouldn't want to rely on a Whoop band to tell me what I am and what I'm doing. But just knowing that, when you have a good night's sleep and you just wake up and you think, gosh, that was a great sleep. You just know, don't you? You just know. Yeah. But then also, on the contrary, when you wake up and you think, God, I was up 4, 5, 6 times for no reason whatsoever. But luckily, when you're on holiday, you just seem to always have a great sleep. And you just
yeah. But see, so you can just lay on. You can just sleep.
Yeah.
There's no alarm. You can just lay on for an extra hour if you didn't have a great sleep.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so it's mad. Some nights I get up at 6 and some nights I can sleep right through. And other nights I'm up at 2 and I don't get back to sleep till like 5. And then it's really annoying because you're really in a deep sleep and then you have to get up at 6. So it's just
especially for you when you're having to travel 2 hours to the clinic.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about it. The less I talk about my commute, the more, the less, the better, because then it's less of a realization of what I actually do.
But you know what the interesting thing is though, right? See, in the UK, like, people traveling 2 hours to work sounds absolutely mental, right? But see, in places like Australia or even America, Canada, even parts of Spain, because you think, oh, that's not far. But like Valencia from here is like another 220 kilometers. But when you look on the map, it looks like it's just like down the road.
Yeah.
So in the UK, like, I wouldn't be doing that, definitely. But I know people in London commute, like, they do the tube and all that sort of stuff, and you're always on the go. But sitting in a car for 2 hours, I can't do that, man. I'm lucky. I don't know how you do it, but
yeah, no, I get the train most days, so breaks it up. It's not too.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, just one other thing. So we've had obviously quite a few guests on talking about mouthpieces and mouth guards and stuff, but it still feels like we haven't touched the sides, because there's still so many. I wouldn't say so many, but there's still a few really interesting guests who we know in the mouth guard industry, in the mouthpiece industry, who will get on as time goes on. It just seems that there doesn't seem to be like a limit in terms of what can be achieved, what can be done. And it's really fascinating. I know we talk about trying not to get too many people on kind of back to back talking about the same thing, but I feel it's so diverse and it's so different in terms of what each guest is bringing on. And hopefully it keeps the people who are listening, our listeners, on their toes and appreciating the guests that we're getting on, because there's some really, really big names that we've got lined up and also who we've had on. And I'm grateful, because I think without this podcast, I don't think we'd have that information readily available to us.
No, definitely. Even just this conversation we've just had has really got me thinking more about what sort of influence does that tongue in between our lower teeth have. And like, it made me think back to what Anel said at one stage, where he said he couldn't really help class 3s as much. He said class 2s, he found the biggest improvements. And then you're thinking class 3 develops because your tongue is sitting between your lower teeth and your lower jaw ends up expanding and it gets bigger than your upper jaw. And So does that then does that almost help back up what Bob and AIRWAAV are saying, where they're just focusing on the position of that tongue on the lower arch? That's was, and like I would never started thinking about that unless we have had these conversations. If we didn't have that conversation with the male and he had mentioned that, and we didn't have this conversation with Bob when he explained where their focus is, I wouldn't have been thinking the way I'm thinking now, thinking, I wonder, is there something there? Because two people have now said it from different aspects.
Yeah.
And if I need to start rethinking about my thoughts when it comes to tongue position and athletic performance. Now, obviously, when we're thinking about tongue position with myofunctional therapy and development of bites and things like that, we might not want to change it from that perspective. But like, if we're talking about it from a sports dentistry perspective and about athletic performance, do I need to start to rethink my concepts and tongue posture and things like that? So, as you said, there's so much information out there. Unless we're having these conversations, we're just not going to find it.
But that also leads on to, you talk about tongue position and the position of the lower anteriors and all that sort of stuff. That also then brings into the realms of possibilities is orthodontics, because it's all very well saying, yeah, we'll make you this mouthpiece that can do this, and we'll put your tongue in this position and your jaw in this position. But actually, is it not more beneficial for them to go through orthodontic therapy to help improve the position of the teeth, to widen the arch form, to improve the airway that way? So that's another discussion that opens up, because there'll be people who then say, actually, why are you relying on something artificial where you can actually then move the teeth to provide space for the tongue to open the airway? Very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, I think. But then what the issue is, sometimes by the time we get to see these athletes, they're adults. And it's not the ideal time to go into orthodontics and for developing and stuff. And that's the challenge. If we find that, yes, it's going to improve the athletes if we can crack their occlusion and do orthodontics early, but then we need to start looking at these athletes at 10, 11, 12 at the latest, and then you're not going to know your elite athletes. So as we talked about it with in Saul's podcast, the drop off rate from the academies to the people that actually make it. So I think that's the difficulty when it comes to orthodontics. A lot of the times when we start working with these athletes, they're already older than that ideal window for starting orthodontics.
Yeah, so that brings us really nicely to Saul's episode, because he was obviously talking about looking at the academy players. That's also an opportunity for you to look at the developing dentition, and, well, not developing dentition, because they should have all their teeth by then, apart from the 8. But then you're looking at ortho at that stage, you'd be like, actually, you would benefit from having ortho surgery or orthodontic therapy, because it will improve X, Y, and Z. And until we start screening younger players, so like you said, 11, 12, 13, where that's where we would normally start to look at ortho treatment, I think that's something that we need to look at more, potentially, because I've seen some wild malocclusions in athletes, and I'm thinking, how have you got to this stage and you've not had any treatment done? Like, how? And just think about how much better you would be if your alignment was better, your sleep would be, then I'm starting thinking about all the other stuff, like just like airways and the posture, and we talked about occlusion and how that can help potentially the way that you carry yourself and how it influences the rest of your body. It just opens up a different kind of avenue for you to look at and pursue, because you could potentially impact the athlete in a much bigger way than you actually think if you didn't do it. So if you didn't do something about it, then you're like, okay, well, they're just kind of doing it, but you could actually make a massive improvement. I don't know. I'm just chewing the fat
definitely.
there.
And maybe even a little bit older, because you was seen it like when the younger soccer players break through, like Rashford was in fixed orthodontics whenever he broke through to Man United. Yamal, is it Jamal?
That's right. Yeah. He's in it.
The wee whiz kid.
Yeah.
Was that whenever he won the big major competition with Spain, he was in fixed orthodontics.
Yeah.
And they were about 16, 17 when he was 16. I think Rashford was 17 when he was breaking through. So
Yeah.
that's
Ronaldo's had it. Cristiano Ronaldo's had it as well.
So maybe it may be then we can start to get access to these athletes, but ideally from a development point of view, we want to be treating them earlier. So that's maybe the challenge as well.
But then that goes hand in hand with what I was saying before, just about speaking to somebody who, or a specialist in, for example, sleep, and how they view airways and how they view the tongue, and how we really need to get people like that on board to say that actually it's really important that we look at malocclusion a lot younger and see how we can facilitate that orthodontically to help improve. And then when it comes into mouthpieces, then that's just an adjunct. Obviously, we know it's an adjunct, but like an even bigger adjunct, because everything is already in a good position and you're improving that just that little 1% more or 2% more.
Yeah. There's so many other good conversations we're going to be having on this podcast.
Definitely. But I mean, that's kind of made us have a good conversation there and a good chat about different avenues to go down, and I hope may that continue on each episode. But yeah, just to go back to that one more point, Bob will be giving us a discount code. Hopefully I'll be able to put that on when we release the podcast. And if not, then we'll get it to you as soon as we can. So if you do buy it, listeners, if you do try it, please let us know what you think. Honest feedback. We can obviously relay that back to Bob and AIRWAAV, and we'll certainly try it ourselves as well to see how that goes. But we want to just say thank you very much for the people coming on and giving us their time to talk about these products. And we would open the floor up to anybody else if they've got any other sort of products on the market that they want us to have a chat about and discussion about, then yeah, feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, that's great. I'm definitely going to be trying out the recovery one. So I'd play a lot of contact sports, so I think I might stick to my performance mouthguard, especially at my age. Don't want to take risks. But I'll definitely try out their recovery.
Definitely. One. If you can be that 1% better at hurling, mate, then you know you'd have to stop your teammates from carrying you all the time. So,
well, look, they need 15 players to play. You know, so I'm doing my part.
That's true, mate. That's true.
Right. Enjoy the rest of your time in Spain. The next time we chat, you'll be back to reality.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, John. And we'll be in touch and we'll chat soon.
Chat soon. Good man.
Perfect.